Hi there, I'm the _twig, and I like analysing game rules. So I think that many of you will probably be aware that D&D spellcasters tend to be quite powerful. That's primarily down to a few individually powerful outlier spells though. On the standard table where the wizard casts Cone of Cold, they aren't likely noticeably better or worse than martial classes like the fighter. It's only when they start using outlier spells like Wall of Force that they get overwhelming. I do think that it's worth noting, however, that Wall of Force isn't quite as overwhelming as my gratitude to my Patreons. Do you want to see my videos early, and even get the full audio recording for my next big video on Locate Objects right now? Come join us. Extra thanks to SK, who magically appears when you cast Conjure Celestial. There are a few spells that you could consider to be the poster child of outlier spells, like Simulacrum, Force Cage, and Wish, but the first completely game-warping spell, at least in my opinion, is Conjure Animals. That's what they're addressing here. This playtest has redesigns for all of the Conjure X spells from the 2014 PHB, as well as some slight reworks of the basic healing spells and 3 new spells. Because the healing spells are the simplest changes, I'm going to do these first. For the most part, they just get some slight numerical boosts to healing, because in 2014 they just weren't very efficient. Why heal someone when they're probably going to take a lot of damage from a monster anyway? Cure Wounds got a boost to 2d8 plus spell mod, and it increases by 2d8 for every upcast. Same for Healing Word. It's now 2d4 plus mod and upcasts by 2d4. Mass Cure Wounds now starts at 5d8 plus mod instead of 3d8 plus mod, and Mass Healing Word now starts at 2d4 plus mod instead of 1d4 plus mod. Also worth noting that they are now all Abjuration, for the tiny number of cases where that's important. So are these healing spells worth casting now? Healing Word and its mass equivalent have always been okay for getting people up when they've dropped to 0, but how about using them to heal at any other time? Not really. Single-use healing is just not innately very powerful in D&D due to the action economy, the fact that only your last hit point matters, and the offensive capabilities of monsters. There are a few legitimately good healing spells, like Aura of Vitality, but they are almost exclusively good as post-combat recovery options when you don't want to short rest. I think that to make Cure Wounds an option worth picking, you'd have to make it actually ridiculously strong, and I don't want that. As such, even though these healing buffs don't really make that much of a difference, I'm sort of happy about that. The only other option would be to make a full-scale redesign, giving these spells completely different functionality, which I'm not expecting nor particularly calling for. Overall, these healing changes are just sort of whatever. Pleasant, but not exactly changing the viability of them. So, the bit that we're all interested in. The Conjure Spells. These were almost all completely busted in 2014, some of them being more infamous than others. Cough, Conjure Animals. They've all been completely redesigned though, so you're no longer summoning a creature with a stat block. You are instead creating an effect which has been flavoured to be a group of animal spirits, or whatever else, doing a thing for you. I'm not going to explain specifically what each of the 2014 variants of these spells did, but they were all some variation of summon a bunch of guys who will swarm the battlefield and make your fighter feel redundant. The majority of these are Moonbeam style effects, where the spell does a thing when a creature enters its effective area or starts its turn there, although there are a few exceptions. Also, all of these are 10-minute concentration. So, starting off with the big boy, Conjure Animals. This is available to Druid and Ranger, and is 3rd level. You now get to make a swarm of animals which appear in a 2x2 area. It is unclear if creatures can move through the space that this swarm is in. This is a Moonbeam type effect with an effective area of any square within 10 feet of the swarm. That means that the total effective area of the spell is a 6x6 grid or 32 spaces. That's reasonably large. You can also move it by up to 30 feet every turn for free, although weirdly, you have to move to do it, so I guess that you can't move the spell while you're being grappled. When a creature enters the effective area for the first time on a turn, or starts its turn there, you can make a melee spell attack against it to do 2d10 plus spell mod damage. This also upcasts by 1d10. Whilst you're standing in the area, you also get advantage on strength saves, which is a fairly minor benefit in the grand scheme of things. This is okay. I'd say that it's effectively a slight improvement on Flaming Sphere. It actually does slightly less damage than an upcast Moonbeam, but it has a larger area to make up for that. I think it's worth noting that there's nothing saying that you have to put your Conjure Animals on the ground. You could summon a swarm of birds flying 10 feet above the ground, meaning that the full 6x6 grid is active even if your DM decides that you can't walk through the middle of it. Not bad. I could maybe even see the damage being increased to say 3d8 plus mod. I don't think that that's actually necessary though. An important thing to note is that because it says when a creature hostile to you enters a space within 10 feet of the swarm, You and your allies can push and pull enemies in and out of the effective area to repeatedly trigger it. This right here is the main reason why I don't think it needs that damage bump. The next spell is Conjure Celestial. This is a 7th level spell which is only available to clerics. You get a moonbeam style effect in a 10-foot radius cylinder, which also creates bright light. Again, you can move it 30 feet when you move. When a creature enters or starts its turn in the effective area, you can either heal them by 4d12 or do 8d12 damage, halved on a dex save. Both of those upcast by 1d12. Notably, the healing can only be done once per creature per casting, although you can use the effect on the same creature multiple times, just to avoid damaging them. They just won't receive any benefits after the first turn. That's an incredibly important point, because otherwise it would be completely busted. Remember what I said earlier about single-use heals being mediocre? Repeat-use heals are ridiculously potent. So this spell is like insanely powerful. At 7th level, Cleric also gets Firestorm, which is an instantaneous spell which does 7d10 halved on a dex save. This does more damage than that every single turn, and you can also heal your allies. I really like the idea of this spell, but it needs that damage scaling right back, maybe to the like 6d10 or something. Currently, it's almost a must-pick for any cleric which reaches 13th level, and must-pick options are not good. Especially because, like Conjure Animals, you can push and pull enemies in and out to do the damage multiple times per round. Moving on though, Conjure Elemental. This is a 5th level for druids and wizards. Like Conjure Animals, you summon an elemental spirit in a 10-foot cube, although the effective range of this one is only within 5 feet, so it's just a 4x4. Unlike the others, you also can't move it. When a creature enters the effective space, you can make a melee spell attack for 8d8, and if they are large or smaller, the creature is also pulled inside the elemental and is restrained. Whilst they're restrained, they must make a strength save at the start of every turn, escaping on a success or taking 4d8 on a fail. All of that damage also upcasts for 2d8 per spell level. It's kind of like a cross between Moonbeam and Watery Sphere, except you can't move it. You can also only restrain one creature at a time, although it doesn't say what happens if you try and restrain another creature whilst one is already inside the elemental. Is the first one ejected? Are you just unable to attempt to restrain another one? I don't really know. Now then, if you have an enemy restrained by the elemental, you can potentially do 12d8 damage to them every round. For a 5th level spell, that's insane. It also scales by 4d8, because both damage sources appear to increase. On the other hand, if you don't restrain the creature or they just escape, then they simply go stand on the other side of the battlefield and you waste your 5th level slot because you can't move it. This is the only spell in the playtest that I actually don't like. It does too much if it works, but it's just super feel bad if it doesn't work. It reads like they didn't really know what they were going for. Why doesn't it move? Why do both damage sources increase by such a large amount? What if you don't want to restrain the creature, or you want to restrain a different creature? I think this one needs a rewrite. Anyway, Conjure Fey is next. This one is a 6th level druid spell that actually works like Spiritual Weapon. When it appears, or when you use a bonus action to move it, you can make a melee spell attack against a creature within 5 feet to do 3d12 plus spell mod. If it hits, the creature must also make a whiz save or be frightened for a round, although it is unclear what the source of the frightened condition is. I'd imagine it's the Fey, but it could be argued to be you, since you made the attack roll. This is not great on its own, however it scales by 2d12 per spell level. That's actually significant. When you cast it at 8th level, you're doing 7d12 per round, which is a fairly sizable chunk of damage. Now, I'm not sure that Conjure Fey is a good use of an 8th level spell slot, but it is an option that exists. Ultimately, I don't think Conjure Fey is an outstanding spell, but I would much rather that spells were mediocre than they were busted. The great thing about spells compared to class features is that you can choose the ones that you want, especially on a daily preparation class like the Druid. You are free to grab as many strong and weak spells as you want, or target them for a specific day. Maybe you're going to be fighting something that is specifically weak to psychic damage, or you really want to inflict the frightened condition. It's also not so weak that it could be considered a trap. Conjure Fey being a bit weak is absolutely fine. I'm far happier with this version than the old version. Next we have Conjure Minor Elementals, a 4th level druid and wizard spell. This one is like Spirit Shroud. All attacks do an extra 2d8 damage if you hit an enemy within 15 feet. Also, that area is difficult to terrain for enemies only, and when you upcast it, the damage increases by 2d8 and the area increases by 5 feet. I quite like this. Moon Druids and Blade Singers will appreciate it a fair amount. Valabards too. I am a little worried about it upcasting at 2d8 though. Those additional attacks can stack up fast sometimes, and there could potentially be some kind of degenerate stuff where you cast this at 5th level, then dip Monk and use Nick weapons or something to get a huge number of attacks, adding 48 to each one. I think this should maybe go down to just 1d8 scaling. Finally, our last Conjure spell is Conjure Woodland Beings. This is a 5th level spell for Druid and Ranger. Now, they previously said that they would be including all spells with the same level and the same names, just updated effects. Conjure Woodland Beings used to be 4th level though, not 5th level. I'm not sure if that's a mistake or if they're reconsidering that decision. If it's the latter, then I'm pretty happy about that, because I think that they were realistically probably just making life harder for themselves. So this one is basically just Spirit Guardians. You get a 10-foot aura, and whenever an enemy enters or starts its turn there, they take 5d8 force damage halved on a whiz save, upcasting by 1d8. You also get to disengage as a bonus action. I mean, Spirit Guardians is obviously a good spell. This is a good spell too. Now, the Druid spell list does have more relevant concentration options than the Cleric list. At 5th level you have things like Summon Draconic Spirit, Anti-Life Shell, and Wall of Stone. But this is also a worthy cast. It's just not the absolute go-to. As such, happy with this spell. Finally, there are 3 new spells. A cantrip, a 4th level spell, and a 7th level spell. Cantrip first, this is Starry Wisp, a Bard and Druid attack cantrip with a 60-foot range, which does 1d8 damage. The creature you hit also emits a bit of light for 1 round, and can't benefit from the invisible condition. It can also target both creatures and objects. In case you are unaware, almost all spells can't damage objects, with the only notable exceptions being Firebolt, Shatter, and Earthquake. Almost every DM I know either ignores this or is just unaware of that fact, because of course you can Rare Frost a door. But if you're on the rare table where you actually follow that rule, then this is another option for you. Anyway, Starry Wisp. This is actually the best damage cantrip for Bard now, and on a Druid it's tied with the much improved Produce Flames. I don't think that the light and invisibility denial on Wisp is especially great compared with some of the class's other cantrips, but sure, why not have another good ranged option? Fount of Moonlight is next, which is a 4th level spell, also for Druid and Bard. It's also concentration for 10 minutes. This one says that you give off a bit of light, gain resistance to radiant, your melee attacks do an extra 2d6 damage, and you can use your reaction when you take damage from a creature within 60 feet to blind them on a con save. Unfortunately, I think this one has its thunder stolen entirely by Conjure Minor Elementals. That does more damage and upcasts incredibly. Fount is probably better at 4th level specifically, but it doesn't upcast at all, so it's not great afterwards. I think that this one should probably have an upcast added, likely by 1d6, and it should also become a bonus action, which would give it a turn advantage compared to Minor Elementals. By the way, it's not written here, but Moon Druids can now cast this while wild-shaped. The last spell here is Power Word Fortify. This is 7th level on Bard and Cleric. This one says that you choose 1 to 6 creatures and give them 120 temp HP, split evenly between them all. That means 40 temps to 3 creatures, or 20 temps if you choose all 6. So this one is really good if you cast it on just 1 or 2 creatures, and really bad if you cast it on all 6. You want to try and concentrate those temps on the characters who need them most, likely your Barbarian or Fighter, rather than spreading them around. As a reminder, Aid got an update in the Cleric and Species playtest, so it now gives up to 6 creatures temp HP. When cast at 7th level, it gives 30 temps. That means that if you're casting Power Word Fortify on 4 or more creatures, Aid is just as good, if not better. So the question is, how do we make Power Word Fortify better when you multi-target without making it even more incredible when single-targeting? I think that the answer is probably to just not force you to share the temps equally. Allow people to dish out 120 HP in any combination they want. You want 40 to give Jess the Barbarian a little more bulk, but then 80 on Freddy the Wizard because a Balor just teleported next to him? Sure thing. Otherwise though, really solid spell. So overall, this is a thumbs up from me. The only real changes I want to see are a reduction in the damage of Celestial, a reduction in the upcasting of Minor Elementals, a small buff to Fount of Moonlight to put it on par with Minor Elementals, free sharing of Power Word Fortify, and I think that only Conjure Elemental needs to go back to the drawing board entirely. With the exception of Conjure Elemental, that should all be fairly easy. Good job, Watsy. I like the spells. Thanks for watching. Only the Druid is left, and that's hopefully going to be fairly short, because only Wild Shape and Moon Druid were changed. Subscribe so you don't miss that. Also, a quick request from me. Do any of you know any systems or third-party rules with really good crafting mechanics? I've been wanting to do a Monster Hunter meets Resetia style campaign, where the party go out and craft stuff with monster parts and then sell them in a shop. The systems that I'm familiar with just don't have sufficient support for that though, and I'd rather not homebrew an entire crafting system if I don't have to. That's it from me though. Bye!